I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 10. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hi, guys. Welcome to this week's episode. Man, we're cruising now. Just needed a little breathing space, a little reflective time. You will see that if you follow us on Instagram, which is our handle is velocity.work, you'll see that we posted a post that listed the questions that I asked on the podcast last week, or that I gave you to be able to ask yourself on the podcast last week if you need to take a breath, take a minute. And so if you don't follow us there, head on over. We're a blast to be around. And then also something else that's new I wanted to tell you about. I don't know if you guys have heard of speakpipe.com. Probably many have. Apparently they've been around for like ever. But speakpipe.com/velocitywork. If you go there, you can click a button and leave a voice message for us. And I would love to hear from the listeners thoughts, questions that you have that maybe I didn't go into or I didn't answer, or maybe I said something that was confusing to you on the podcast. I would love to know about it there. Also, if you have topics that you really want me to dig into, I am happy to. So please head over to speakpipe.com/velocitywork. Leave a message there. It can be anonymous if you want it to be, or you can put your name and email, whichever way you want to do it. It's totally fine with me. I care more than anything about just getting information and content to you guys that matters. And if you want to make it around, how you're showing up and leadership and mental mind management, all of that around owning and running your own firm, that's great. If you want it to be, if you have specific questions around metrics or goals or retreats or how to get your team on board, anything that you are struggling with or dealing with from an owner's perspective, bring it. That's the kind of stuff I want to hear. Now, so speakpipe.com/velocitywork. The next thing I'll say is that today is kicking off a series of 2 to 3 podcasts that their episodes will be on how to use your brain to get the results you want in your firm. And they're foundational. I can't not cover them because so much stems from this knowledge. And it's so much, if you understand these things, it's so much easier to build on that. So today is kicking that off. And after that, we've got some cool things planned. I'm trying to get together. I'm going to get together. I'm just in the middle of it, getting together a bit of a roundtable on a couple of different topics. One of them is what percentage of your revenue should be allocated for specific things inside the business. And there's no right answer for this, by the way. And every firm looks very different. So I can get on here and tell you what I think, that how you should be thinking about it. But I think it would be really helpful and really cool to get a few people in a conversation that you can listen to about topics like that, where there really isn't a right answer, but you can hear from several people who I try to vet them before we get on the podcast so that I know that they are doing well and that they have some interesting things to say that you guys can think about. So I'm working on that, and I want to do more roundtables. So I'm putting together some topics on it, and for those, look forward to that coming in the future. But again, SpeakPipe, if you can head there and let me know if there's specific things you would love to have just for someone to dig into, because because it is really hard to come up with the right answer. Like, you can ask advice and opinions all day long, and every owner attorney is going to have a different answer for you. And many of them will feel very convicted about the answer they give to you. But what is working for them may not make sense for you. And so it's nice to sort of have a holistic discussion around it. So if there's things or ideas you have that you want to go deep in that regard, go over to speakpipe.com/velocitywork and let me know. Happy to work hard there to get the answers that you want. And the other thing I'll say is there's lots of exciting things coming down the pipe. I am taking October to really get out of my head and onto paper tools to be able to make available to listeners. And so my plan is that, if it makes sense for a resource to accommodate an episode, I want to make that happen. So keep your eyes peeled, and I'll be letting you know as those come out. And of course, if you follow us on Instagram, we'll let you know there, but just be open to it. We're also on Facebook, and we do post there as well if that's more your speed. And it's like facebook.com/meetvelocitywork. So anyway, okay, on to this episode. So this is the first of a few episodes that'll be a bit of a series around how to get your brain to get you the results that you want in your firm. This one is called How Being an Emotional Adult Will Supercharge Your Firm. I'm just going to dig right in. I have an outline that I've worked really hard on, and same for the future weeks. Emotional childhood is when we do not take responsibility for how we feel. We are responsible for how we feel in every moment. We are in charge of how we think. We are in charge of how we feel. And when we are functioning as emotional children, we are blaming other people for how we feel, how we act, the results we get in our life, etc., etc. Now, this isn't meant to be an insult, and I'll say more about that in a little bit. It's super common, and no wonder why. As children, we don't have the capacity to handle things in any other way. Like, we tend to think when we're little that everything that's going on in our life is just causing our feelings. And that's typically perpetuated by how we're raised. Like, how many times have you heard from a teacher or a parent, "Now, Jenny, you're really hurting that little girl's feelings. You need to say sorry for hurting her feelings." Or, "When she did that, did it hurt your feelings?" Things like that. It sort of conditions us to place blame and responsibility on others for how we feel, and sometimes on the results that we get. It's rampant in our society. And now, it's not like we hit 18 or we become an adult and there's this class that's offered in college or high school or whatever. "Hey, okay, you're 18. It's time for you to become an emotional adult. Here's what that means." And so it's fascinating. And I think if there was a class like that, if we could elaborate on, but still have the point that, now that you're an adult, you have the brain processes to be able to understand what you're thinking. You can start thinking about your thinking, and therefore you can decide what to think and what to feel in any given moment, no matter what anyone else does in your life. And I think that's a really simplified way of saying it, but it's almost like we're just not ever shifted into that mode. Some of us do, for a multitude of reasons. Some of us sort of get there on our own more than others, but it's just a part of how our society functions, where we tend to show up and we think that other people hurt our feelings, or we are afraid of hurting other people's feelings. And this causes problems. There are so many emotional children functioning as adults, and this is not meant to be insulting. Again, it's typically insulting when you're talking about an adult as a child of some sort, but it's just so ingrained. We don't even realize that we teach each other that other people are responsible for how we feel. And another way to think about this is, have you ever unintentionally or intentionally guilt-tripped someone into spending time with you or doing something? It's such an easy example to point to. And we've all likely done that at some point in our lives, or we've been on the receiving end of someone attempting to do it to us. I could think of, I haven't lived where I grew up in 20 years, but over the years, it's really easy for parents to, and I think they've done a good job, but for parents to every once in a while guilt trip you into making that extra trip home or et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny. And it's almost like they place it on you that they will be sad unless you show up, right? And it's so innocent. Like, really, I'm saying that. And some of you probably listening are like, well, yeah, but bear with me here. So there's just a lot of blame. There's a lot of blame going around for how we feel, how we act, how we behave, and the results that we get. And that, as an owner of a law firm, needs to be in check for you because it will allow you to more efficiently and more quickly achieve the results that you want to achieve. You won't be getting in your own way. You won't be stopped by things that are happening outside of you. And it is subtle. I'm telling you, most of the people that I work with aren't blatant. I mean, sometimes they are, but most of the time they are not blatant, like outward emotional children who are yelling and throwing tantrums. It's not like that. It's subtle. It's super subtle. So we tend to blame the government. We blame the economy. We blame our employees. We blame our clients. We blame our exes. We blame our mothers. We blame our fathers. We blame our childhood. We blame the person that took something from us. We blame everyone for feeling the way we feel and why we're doing what we're doing and the results that we're getting. Blame feels like such a strong word, but for many of us, again, it's just really subtle. It's not all out fury that we feel at other people that totally takes us over, although we have all been there, right? It's the little whisper thoughts that are sneakily disempowering. She shouldn't have done that to me. They've put me in a bad spot. Or because they weren't responsible, things are going south really quickly. Like, that's such a victim-y perspective. There's zero upside to having that disempowered victim-y perspective. Emotional adulthood is when we decide to take full responsibility for everything we feel, no matter what someone else does or does not do. And this is no small feat. This is a huge challenge for most of us. The idea of it seems so straightforward, but then you find yourself feeling so justified in your blame. But again, there is no upside. It can be tough because it's such a default way of operating until you have awareness and can consciously choose to take full responsibility. But emotional adulthood is amazing because when, for instance, when someone comes to me feeling like a victim, they feel at the mercy of someone else in their life. And any long-term partnership is a really common example to look at something like this, whether it's a spouse or a firm partner or even a really long-time employee. If and when someone goes on and on to me about how this person is making them feel frustrated, this person is making them feel disappointed, this person is making them feel sad, and et cetera, all these different emotions. And what I will say to them is, look at how much power you're giving this person over your emotional life. And the truth of the matter is, you're an adult and you are responsible for everything you feel. This person's actions do not determine how you feel. And notice when you blame them for how you're feeling, it's usually a feeling that fuels you to behave or take action that you don't even want to be taking, that you don't feel good about, you're not proud of. It's not in integrity with who you want to be. Here's the truth. And I want you to listen. This is the important part. Listen. When something happens outside of you, that's what we call a circumstance, occurs. You have a thought, oftentimes many, many, many thoughts about it. And the totality of those thoughts is your perspective. Your perspective, or what you're thinking about the circumstance, triggers a feeling inside of you. From that feeling state, you behave in a very specific, certain kind of way. You take a very specific kind of action. And that action will provide you with a very specific result. I really want you to hear that. I mean, if I'm just going to say it faster, it's basically there's something that happens outside of you, something that you can't control. It's just like what happened in the world. And then you have a thought about it, which triggers a feeling state. And from that feeling state, you take a very specific kind of action, and then you get a certain result. So your point of power is your perspective. Everything stems from the thoughts that you choose to think, how you feel, how you behave, and the results you get. It all stems from your perspective. Emotional childhood is a result of an unawareness of all of this. It puts us in a place where we don't feel like we have control over ourselves as adults, and we therefore start acting like toddlers. We're just at the effect of the world around us. I've done this so many times in my own life. I mean, we're human, right? I've done this so many times. Something doesn't go the way I wish it would have, or someone doesn't act or do the thing that I think they should have done. And I catch myself whining or complaining or pouting. And when I say whining, pouting, etc., like it's not always visible to others, but inside that's exactly what's happening. Maybe sometimes raising my voice. And so it's like, it's just this total disempowered state. So I'm blaming something or someone outside of me for how I feel, essentially, for the position that I'm in, instead of truly taking responsibility for every emotion that I have. When I'm in emotional adulthood and I take responsibility for how I feel and I make choices for how I want to feel, I end up so much more empowered and I get to be the kind of person I want to be instead of being this default emotional child or being in this default emotional childhood space. And I get a completely different set of results from this place. I see it with a lot of clients and how they just completely abdicate responsibility, not just for their feelings, but for the results inside their firm. I hear owners say, I mean, a multitude of things could be an example, but just as an easy example, my team just isn't fully invested in the goals of the firm, or one of my team members isn't pulling their weight. Okay, let's just say you're correct. Let's just say that your team isn't very invested in the goals of the firm, that they have a punch the clock mentality, right? Or even if one of your team members isn't pulling their weight, they're not bringing in new business. Maybe they're making a bunch of small mistakes. And you may have thoughts like, they should be different. They should care more. My firm is suffering because of them. We're not going to hit our goals because they aren't really interested in hitting the goals. And then, or we're not going to hit our goals because they keep making mistakes. Like there's just all these, it's almost, if you can visualize this, it's almost like you sitting back, moving through the world, and this is the way you're thinking about it. This is the way you're thinking about an unideal, quote unquote, situation. Now, when you think that way, you feel crappy. And when you feel emotionally crappy, you don't behave or take action that produces the results you really want. But if you notice that someone on the team has fallen into a punch the clock mentality, or someone on the team is making a series of mistakes, what if instead of thinking about it with the disempowered perspective, you thought, oh, okay, how can I take responsibility for this? How maybe is the issue stemming from me? In what ways may that be true? Answers start to come that make a whole lot more sense in terms of what you can do about it. And taking full responsibility allows you to stay functioning at a really high level, and it produces more ideal outcomes more quickly. I would put my money all day, every day on an owner who takes full responsibility for all of it than one who just doesn't. That firm will grow faster. It will run more seamlessly. It will have a happier, more productive team. That firm will hit its goals. The culture will be one of accepting responsibility because it all trickles down from the owner. So when you're in the space of blame of any degree, so again, it can be subtle, but just any degree of blame at all, or placing responsibility on someone else for making sure you feel good, you end up constantly trying to control that person. And maybe you do this with everyone. So maybe you essentially try to control your team or control your family members. And it's not, and I'm bringing up outside of the firm because life is not just about you and your firm. So I'm also going to prompt you to think about your personal relationships. Where are you maybe placing your emotional life in someone else's hands? If I give my emotional life over to my husband when my happiness is his responsibility, or I even by default, when I'm frustrated or sad, that he is, at least partially responsible for that. It's like saying what you do causes an emotion in me. And so from that place, I'm totally going to try to control him because it's like I'm going to constantly try to tell him what to do or what he's doing wrong so that he'll do it the right way. And then I get mad when he doesn't do it and my emotions are all over the place. And it's because I'm making him the pawn in my emotional chessboard. Whatever he does is going to determine how I feel if I'm operating that way. This is it's just such a disempowered place to be. And it's maddening because you can't control other people. Have you noticed that? They don't really like it when you try either. So it's almost like we have a manual for how other people should think and how other people should act. But, if I go to my husband, and this is no different than a team member, someone who works for you, but it's really easy to see in close partnerships. If I go to him and say, hey, here are my needs and I need you to meet them, it's almost as if I am a dependent child. And most people don't want to spend all of their time and energy trying to make you happy because they're trying to manage their own emotional life. So delegating that responsibility to even someone that you love can affect that relationship in a really painful way. So yes, look at it from a personal aspect as well as from a working aspect. With everyone around you, where do you have even the tiniest bit of blame to something outside of yourself for how you feel, act, or the results that you've gotten? So as we're nearing sort of final thoughts just on this topic and around this, many of you listening to this have probably at least once during this episode thought about someone you know who should be listening to this. Or like, oh man, my partner is such an emotional child. Or, even if it's one of your team members, my paralegal needs to hear this. Or like that always happens to me and to everyone else. But no. We all need to hear this. I mean, it's great if you want to share it, but bring it back to you. Look in the mirror. Where can you apply this knowledge? We have a Velocity Work Manifesto, and one of the statements on it is, we take responsibility for all of our thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. We don't blame, whine, complain, or hide. And I love that. Remember, this isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And I teach this stuff, and I still have times where I'm like, whoa, I need to take a step back. Like I'm totally allowing what's happening outside of me right now to dictate how I feel. And I know better. I'm going to choose something different. Another thing, emotional adulthood is like saying, I am responsible for my happiness and I'm also responsible for my unhappiness. I'm responsible when my feelings get hurt and I'm responsible for my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. And people say to me all the time, well, if you're only responsible for how you feel, then won't you abdicate responsibility for how you treat other people? And I really think the opposite is true. When you are acting from a place of emotional adulthood, you don't act in a way that's mean to other people. You don't act in a way that's cruel because you are not acting from a place of trying to get them to behave in a way so that you can feel better. Usually when we throw a temper tantrum or we're yelling at people or when we're mean, it's because we're trying to control them. We're trying to get them to behave in a way so that we will feel better. And it's never going to work. And it's only going to cause tension and pain in that relationship. So emotional adulthood is, listen, you get to behave however you want. And I get to behave however I want. And I am responsible for all of my actions. And I am responsible for all of my feelings. And when it comes to your team, it doesn't mean that you that you condone behavior that doesn't produce results they need to get. But when you actually take full responsibility for the results that your business is getting, period, then you could take a look and see, like, what could I maybe do to set him or her up differently, to set them up better? Because sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot in order to do so. And then, eventually, this doesn't mean that you never get rid of someone that works at your firm. It doesn't mean that you need to tolerate things, but it just means you nip it in the bud faster in a more productive way rather than getting upset with them. And there's no you're not owning any of it, right? And and sometimes again, you will feel justified in that, well, no, they just are sucking at their job or whatever. And you'll feel so justified in placing blame. But I'm telling you, emotional adulthood is taking full responsibility for the results that are happening around you. And so in this instance, in your firm. And if you do own all of it, if you do take full responsibility, then your approach on how to get a different result in the future is way more productive and way more adult-like, right? So there is a time and a place where it might make sense to let someone go, but certainly not because they are just disappointing you left and right. They don't disappoint you. They take their own action in the world. It is a circumstance, and you have specific thoughts about it. And you should always take responsibility for the results that are happening. And if it gets to a point where, okay, I have totally done, I have taken responsibility. I have tried these new things. I have created a new system or process inside my business. I have had a really great discussion to make sure that they understand, and it's still not coming together. Well, then, okay, if you've exhausted your efforts and you know that you've shown up the best way you can and the results still aren't happening, maybe you decide to replace that team member. But you don't do it out of sort of a reactive mode. That's what I guess I'm saying. Now, this also doesn't mean that you're not going to take action that sometimes is going to be something you regret. We aren't perfect. We're human, for God's sakes. So be willing to apologize in those times. Take responsibility for how you treat another person. Just because you're not responsible for how they feel, you are responsible for how you behave. And that's really important because you need to decide the kind of leader you want to be in your world and how you want to act in your world. Actually, people who are functioning from emotional adulthood and they're taking responsibility for their feelings, they tend to apologize a lot more because they own up to how they are acting. They really own it. They don't just say, oh, the reason I acted that way is because you didn't do X, Y, or Z the way that it should be done. That's the opposite of taking responsibility for how you think, feel, and behave. Now, the other thing that is important when you are learning this process of really stepping into emotional adulthood deliberately is the point that, it's not then to start blaming yourself for any thoughts, feelings, or actions that you're not liking. If I'm constantly blaming someone else for how I feel and I'm abdicating responsibility for that, when I blame someone else, my tendency may then be to turn that blame onto myself if I'm just used to having blame and go, oh God, this whole time I've been the one. I'm such a terrible person. I'm such an emotional child. And that's not the intention of this process. The intention of this process is to say, oh, so if I feel this way, it's because of what I'm thinking. It's because of my perspective. And if I'm acting this way, it's because of the way I'm thinking about it. It's because of my perspective. And then you can be curious and fascinated about that, and you can treat yourself with kindness and compassion instead of beating yourself up for it. because now you know what you can change. Then it's just a really, there's no upside. I say that a lot, but really, you have to really look at and weigh out, is there upside to this? And this is an instance where blaming yourself, there isn't any upside for it. Just have a look at it and make a different decision. There's no purpose for blaming anyone. In emotional adulthood, we take responsibility for how we feel. So our incidences of showing up in a way that we don't want to show up are greatly reduced. But when it happens, we completely own it and we say, hey, I just want to let you know that's on me. I did that. That fit I had was totally because I was lost in my own brain. That could just be as simple as that. It's a really, really powerful, awesome place to come from. It's a place where you have complete power over your state, which will determine your life. So I encourage you to explore this in your own life. Try it out. Look in your life where you might be an emotional child. How can you take more responsibility there? How can you stop blaming there? And if you did, ultimately, how would that change the results that you're getting in your life? You can actually play out both scenarios. You can sit down and think about, okay, here's an area where I'm probably being more of an emotional child. So how can I step into more emotional adulthood? And then play that out. So then if you do that, you do take responsibility, then you tend to have a more empowered feeling state. And then ideas come to you on how to maybe what next steps make the most sense to get closer to the results that you would like to get to. And then, so you can play that out. It's amazing how very different the results are when you just get deliberate about how you're thinking and how you're feeling, because it just sort of all trickles down from that. It's almost like, that if you think about a ship, it's heading in a direction, and if it just goes like 1 degree different, it doesn't take very long for it to be way off course or way more on course, just that 1 degree. So it's just want to make these minor adjustments in your perspective. And really what it just comes down to is taking full responsibility, whether or not you feel like you're justified in blaming someone else or just putting it on someone else. Who cares? I'm telling you, you will go further faster if you just own all of it and then make the next best decision. And sometimes that's going to lead to letting team members go. Sometimes that means that you can create this shining star inside of your organization because you took full responsibility and because you came with solutions that made a ton of sense for them and for your business. So just you get further faster. It kind of cuts through the bullshit, basically, if you just own it. You own the firm, so you should own the results of everything that happens inside that firm. And when something doesn't go the way you want it to, taking responsibility helps you really right the ship very quickly. Being an emotional adult does require more effort. Yes. It requires a lot more responsibility, but it is worth it. It's worth it to take that step into managing yourself and your mind so that you're not so dependent on other people for how you think, feel, act, or ultimately the results that you get. Consciously stepping into emotional adulthood will supercharge your firm and your life. All right, have a great week, everyone. I will talk to you again soon with the second in this series. Have a good one. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Velocity Work Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you run your own law firm, you have to come see if the Velocity Work client experience is for you. Head over to hello.velocitywork.com to set up a free call. We can learn more about one another, answer any questions we might have for one another, and determine if the Velocity Work client experience is a right fit. I hope to connect with you soon. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.